Some people hear 2 weeks and they immediately translate it into fantasy, into hype, into the same old internet promise that collapses the moment real effort shows up. But that's not what this is, because 2 weeks was never the claim of mastery. It was the claim of momentum, of ignition, of the first real shift where your life stops being a concept and starts being a schedule, a set of reps, a set of decisions that stack so fast you can feel the old version of you losing leverage. Most people don't fail because they're stupid. They fail because they were trained to crawl when they should have been trained to hunt. And the training starts early. It starts in rooms where curiosity gets replaced by compliance, where learning turns into memorizing, where the goal is not capability, but approval, where you spend years collecting information you never touch again, like hoarding tools you never learn to use. And then you walk out into the real world and realize the world doesn't pay for what you know. It pays for what you can do. And if you can't do it under pressure, it doesn't matter how many hours you sat in a chair. This is why some people look lucky from the outside, because they don't treat progress like a theory. They treat it like a contact sport. They don't learn to learn slowly. They learn to learn with friction, with deadlines, with consequences. And the funny part is most people already know this somewhere inside them, because they've had moments where they were forced to move, where the pressure was real enough that excuses didn't survive, where suddenly they became sharp, fast, selective, almost ruthless with their attention. And in those moments, they learn in days what used to take them months. There's a way of operating that doesn't belong to most people, not because it's elite, not because it's complicated, but because it's uncomfortable, because it requires you to stop romanticizing your potential and start confronting your behavior. And that confrontation is where the separation begins. If this already hits something in you, not emotionally, but like a quiet recognition, comment, "I'm Hunter," so your nervous system hears you say it, and then keep moving. Because the first truth is simple, and it's the one most people refuse to accept. Skill is not a mountain, it's a stack. And the stack is built from techniques, not dreams. People say, "I want to learn guitar, I want to learn a language, I want to learn trading, I want to start a business." And they say it the way people talk about storms, like it's this massive thing that will one day arrive and either bless them or destroy them. But a skill is not one thing. It's a collection of small, specific actions you can repeat under pressure without negotiating with yourself. And the moment you understand that, your entire life stops feeling mystical and starts feeling mechanical, in the best way. There is no such thing as learning business as one clean skill, and Naval Ravikant has pointed at this in his own way, because business is just a word people use when they don't want to break the thing down. And breaking it down is where power lives, because when you break something down, you can train it. So the first move is always purpose first, not information first, not inspiration first, purpose first, because purpose gives your mind a target. And without a target, your mind becomes a tourist, clicking, scrolling, collecting, feeling busy while staying the same person. If you want to play a song, you start with the song, not with a textbook about music theory. You put your fingers on the strings, you hear how bad you are, and instead of taking that as a sign you're not gifted, you take it as data and you ask one question only. What is the next technique I need to reach the next note? And that is how real learning works. It is not wide, it is narrow, it is not elegant, it is brutal and practical. It is not study, it is solve. This is how certain people move. They don't learn the whole ocean, they learn the next stroke that keeps them alive. That's the first separation, because most people crave comfort in the form of completeness. They want to feel ready before they start. They want to understand everything before they touch anything. And that's why they stay stuck. Because readiness is a story people tell themselves when they're afraid of looking incompetent for 5 minutes. And here's the part nobody says out loud. The reason it feels heavy isn't the skill, it's the identity conflict. Because the moment you start as a beginner, you temporarily lose the fantasy that you're already the type of person who can do it. And most people would rather keep the fantasy than earn the reality. Some men don't. They let themselves be bad in private. They let themselves be awkward at first. They let themselves miss notes, miss reps, miss entries, because they're not attached to looking good. They're attached to becoming dangerous. Hit like if you know exactly what that means, not as a gesture for the algorithm, but as a quiet signal that you're done worshiping comfort. Now, the second truth is progressive overload of the mind. And this is where people misunderstand what fast actually means. Because fast is not frantic. Fast is selective. Fast is eliminating the unnecessary. Fast is not doing more. It's doing the right reps with full attention until the neural pathway stops being a thought and starts being reflex. You don't bench press 315 on day one. You don't put the heaviest bar on your mind on day one. You earn the ability to carry pressure, and you do it by letting the next weight feel slightly heavy, not crushing, slightly heavy, because slight heaviness creates adaptation, and adaptation creates capacity. And capacity is the only real talent that matters in adulthood. The way most people learn is they binge information until they're sick of it, then they quit, and they call that a lack of discipline. But it's not discipline they lack first. It's structure, because structure is what makes discipline feel like identity instead of punishment. Structure is what makes consistency feel natural instead of forced. And that leads to the third truth, the one almost nobody wants. Rapid learning requires pure focus, and pure focus is rare now because distraction has become a lifestyle, not an event. Pure focus is when you become the task, not as some spiritual cliche, but as a practical state where the mind stops producing commentary and starts producing output, where you stop asking, am I good? And you start asking, what's the next move? And in that state, 2 weeks becomes a weapon, because 2 weeks of pure focus is not 2 weeks of trying, it's 2 weeks of identity reinforcement. Most people have never felt that. They felt busy, they felt entertained, they felt stimulated, they felt anxious, they felt motivated for 12 hours and then dead for 3 days. But they haven't felt pure focus, because pure focus requires you to remove your exits. And most people build their whole life around exits. So here's the quiet line that separates types of people. Some people need comfort to begin, and some people begin and let discomfort shape them into someone who no longer needs comfort. Now we transition because trading is the mirror where all of this becomes brutally obvious. And if you've been trading for any amount of time, you already know what I'm about to say without me teaching you anything. You've felt the pull to strategy hop, not because the strategy failed, but because you felt exposed after a loss. You felt FOMO, not because the setup was perfect, but because your nervous system couldn't tolerate waiting. You've hesitated on the best entry of the week, and then you've chased the worst one 5 minutes later. You've promised yourself you'd be mechanical, and then you've broken your own rules the moment price moved fast enough to scare you. That's not a chart problem, that's an identity leak. Because trading is not just execution, it's emotional governance under uncertainty. And uncertainty is the environment that reveals who you really are. Most people treat trading like a place to win, but it's a place to be exposed. It exposes impatience. It exposes the need to be right. It exposes the addiction to stimulation. It exposes the fear of missing out. It exposes the fear of losing. It exposes the habit of revenge. It exposes the habit of overtrading to make it back. It exposes all the little ways you try to control life instead of controlling yourself. And that's why most people can't learn trading fast. Because they don't just have to learn technique, they have to unlearn themselves. Some traders don't improve in the way the internet describes it. They don't become louder. They don't become more complicated. They don't become more aggressive. They become quieter, and as they become quieter, their decisions become sharper. And as their decisions become sharper, their results become inevitable over a long enough timeline. This is where the hunter archetype shows up, not as a costume, not as an aesthetic, but as a nervous system pattern. The hunter-trader waits. The hunter-trader observes. The hunter-trader doesn't need to be in the market to feel alive. The hunter-trader doesn't need to click to feel productive. The hunter-trader isn't seduced by movement, because movement is not information, movement is bait. The hunter-trader operates with conditions, not emotions, and when conditions align, execution is not a debate, it's a release. This is where a framework like CLS becomes powerful, not because it's secret, not because it's magical, but because it reduces noise into ranges, levels, and behavior. It gives the mind something to hold on to, so the mind stops inventing stories, and you stop trading feelings. You start trading structure. And the truth is, not everyone can tolerate this because boredom is the entrance fee, and most people are addicted to excitement, which means they're addicted to mistakes. Boredom is sacred when you understand what it protects. Repetition is powerful when you understand what it builds. Routine is not a cage, it's armor, and the man who wears it stops bleeding energy into randomness. If you've ever watched yourself sabotage a clean week because you felt good, you already understand this, because emotion doesn't just destroy traders when they feel fear. It destroys them when they feel invincible. It destroys them when they feel impatient. It destroys them when they feel bored. It destroys them when they feel the need to prove something. The hunter-trader doesn't prove, he repeats. And this is where discipline becomes identity, not effort. Discipline is not white-knuckling yourself through pain. Discipline is when your environment and your routine make the right behavior the default. When you stop relying on motivation and start relying on process. When you trade the same models, the same windows, the same risk, the same journal, the same review, until you become the kind of person who would feel strange doing anything else. Because a strategy is just a set of rules, but identity is what enforces the rules when nobody's watching, and trading is mostly you watching yourself. If this part is landing, subscribe, not because you need more content, but because you're the kind of person who doesn't let good reminders disappear back into noise. Now let's talk about the lie that destroys progress. The lie is, I need more time. Most people don't need more time. They need less distraction. They don't need a perfect plan. They need a clean focus window. They don't need another tutorial. They need a single output goal that forces technique stacking. They don't need to learn trading. They need to execute one repeatable model inside a defined structure with defined risk, and then review it until the pattern becomes obvious. This is how you compress years into months, not by intensity alone, but by removing the unnecessary. And this is also why 2 weeks matters, because 2 weeks is long enough to build a streak, and streaks are how identity shifts, because the mind trusts what you repeat, and it doubts what you only talk about. 2 weeks of showing up is not just progress, it's proof. And proof is what shuts your inner critic up, not affirmations. So when you hear 2 weeks, don't hear mastery, hear initiation. Hear, I'm going to become someone who moves daily. Hear, I'm going to become someone who learns by doing. Hear, I'm going to become someone who stacks techniques instead of collecting theory. Hear, I'm going to become someone who can sit in boredom without panicking. Here, I'm going to become someone who can wait, then execute. If you're that type, comment, I wait, then I execute. And let that be your line in the sand. Because after a certain point, the old way stops working. The old way of scrolling for answers. The old way of collecting strategies like souvenirs. The old way of starting, quitting, and calling it life. Some paths close quietly behind you, and you don't notice it in the moment. You just notice one day that you can't go back to being the person who needed constant stimulation because you've tasted what pure focus feels like. And once you see it, you don't unsee it. You stop being impressed by motivation. You stop being impressed by talk. You start respecting execution. You start respecting silence. You start respecting repetition. You start respecting the kind of man who can do the same clean thing every day without needing applause. Not everyone will understand this, and they don't need to, because the work was never for them. It was for the part of you that's tired of being divided. So take the 2 weeks, not as a challenge, not as a gimmick, but as a sharpening. Choose one output that matters. Choose one technique stack that directly serves that output. Remove your exits, compress your world into a narrow corridor of focus, and you'll feel it happen, not as inspiration, but as inevitability. And if this resonated, you already know why.